Winota has long been a fringe strategy in Modern, but now that Fury's banned, this cEDH staple might just be able to find her way.
Follow the yellow brick road.
This incredibly powerful Boros 4-drop puts humans into play for free whenever you attack with non-human creatures. So if you have a large number of attackers, it's not unusual for Winota to trigger 4 or 5 times in one combat, ending the game on the spot. Now Fury gamers
Scammers
are not happy about Winota's return because, kind of like Rapunzel, they wanted her to stay locked away.
Oh no!
But you best believe this maiden is letting her hair down for all to see.
Long hair don't care.
And today, she's gonna get hers in this new Mardu list, and we're gonna stick it to the Fury gamers. Heck, they might even put some salt on it after they get run over. But we like sodium chloride, don't we, Winota?
Yeah.
No Fury means the return of Winota. I'm excited for this one. Let's go. We'll take the play. Opponent reveals a Kahira 7. Clearly a little lackluster, but I think the Pyromancer makes this keep. All right, we'll start with our basic into a Giver. Polluted Delta. Giver survives. What do you know? Drawn to a Rager Captain. Don't hate it. Giver can attack here. I don't think there's any risk of anything happening. Swing for 1. We'll play out our Marsh Flats, and we're going to fetch our Triumph end of their turn. They get a Triumph tapped, end of turn. Feels like a prismatic ending. It is. Giver's gone. Watery Grave tapped. We'll fetch out our Triumph. Untap. Draw Bowmaster, not terrible. We'll shock in this Sacred Foundry. Ranger Captain. Trigger. Let's get a Ragavan. On a basic island, nothing else. We don't draw into Jarina, which is a really cool addition to this deck, along with Giver of Runes, which you already saw bite the dust a few moments ago. Jarina allows us to protect Winota from opposing removal spells, so we can keep her alive long enough to move to combat and reap the rewards of her triggers. It's going back their way. 6 cards in hand. Play out a land. It's going to be another prismatic ending. We'll sacrifice Jarina. Got to protect those humans. End of turn, we'll fetch. Swamp. Flash in our Bowmasters. Counterspell from the opponent, which means Ragavan will be getting in. We draw a second Ragavan.
Mismatching art. Ugh.
Dash the monkey. Combat. Attack for 2. Reveal a Solitude. Can't cast that one, but I think what we will do is Blood Crypt. I'm going to shock that in. Pyromancer. Trigger. Discard the Ragavan. We draw 2 lands. Come on now. Ragavan back to hand. Play out a Glacial Fortress coming back our way. Find a Giver of Runes. So they can have Solitude up. I think we're just going to attack with the Pyromancer. Swinging for 2. Opponent's down to 11. Giver. Sacred Foundry. Tapped. It's going to be an end of turn Solitude. It's going to hit our Giver. It's our Pyro. Interesting. We gain 2. We're up to 16. Basic Island. 4 mana. 5 mana. It's going to be Teferi. Okay, there's a Teferi. Plus Teferi. Draw a card. They untap 2. Back to our turn. We draw into a Winota, which is excellent. If they don't have a counterspell, it might just be game over. Let's dash in this Ragavan. That resolves. Do you have a counterspell? I'm going to try it. Winota? Okay, we are in business. Let's move to combat. And we're just going to bring everybody. Trigger Winota 3 times. Magus? Sure. Monk? That sounds good. Monk's going to trigger. Make 2 1/1s. And we're going to bring in this other Winota. We'll attack them. And we'll keep the new one. And I think this should be lethal. They have to block the monk. They'll go up to 14. Take 4, 6. Oh, okay. Don't block the monk then. Yeah, you're dead. Okay. Up a game. We're going to board in Combo, 2 Blood Moons, 2 Wear Tears, board out Prismatic Ending, Geist Honored Monk, Mutt, and Jarina. This deck plays 22 lands. We are land light, but we're on the draw. I think we can find a second land where we should be good, so we're going to keep. Famous last words. And while I did find a second land 2 turns later, it was after my Ragavan had already been removed, and it was a basic swamp. And my third land was Takenuma. So with the composition of my hand, you can imagine how this game went. I could barely cast anything the entire game. I'm not going to bore you and make you watch me just sit there and do nothing, so let's move on to game 3. Take the play. All right, I like the 7. Plains, Giver, your go. Put with a Triumph, back to us. We find our Triumph. Probably not going to be using that. Marsh Flats, fetch. We get a red-white source. 2 mana for a Mutt. Trigger. We're going to discard the Triumph. Found another Giver. No attacks. Back their way. Watery Grave. Shock. Find a second Pyromancer. Move to combat. Attack for 2. Marsh Flats. Fetch. Blood Crypt Shock. I'm going to try to bait out a counterspell here. Okay, there it is. Opponent untaps up to 7 cards in hand. Basic Island. and we untap. Alright, we find a second Magus. Move to combat, crack in for 2, opponent's down 14. We're going to try to force in one of these Magus. Magi, Archmage's Charm. Opponent's paying cost, they're going to exile our Giver of Runes. We'll give our Mutt Pro White. Draw another Mutt. Let's move to combat, attack for 2. I think we're going to go for the Magus again. Okay, Magus is in. Imagine there's a Solitude somewhere in their hand. They untap, and they do nothing. Drawn to a Bowmaster. We're going to start with this Giver. Okay, it resolves. And now if they have interaction for this Magus, they're going to use it during combat, I would imagine. Attack for 4. There it is. Solitude. Exile a Verdict. Hit our Magus. We'll gain 2. They take 2. Down to 10 life. Well, this deck's plan A is to resolve a Winota in one-shot kill. Plan B is also a viable one, which is to cast a bunch of mediocre creatures and turn them sideways. Winota never showed up this game, but that was okay, because turn after turn of attacks against inefficient removal from my opponent who didn't hear that control is dead easily got us across the finish line over the next few turns. We win the match, and we're 1-0. This is round 2. Opening 7, I don't think we can keep this one mulligan. 6 is a little weak, but I do think we'll keep. Bottom the Monk. We're on the draw. Bottom of the Forest. Draw another Monk. We'll start Sacred Foundry, tapped, pass turn. Swamp, and a Hepatra. Hepatra, Vizier of Poisons, is a very wordy card that basically says, if you have a Yawgmoth in play, target opponent playing a creature deck loses the game. I tried to stall to keep Yawgmoth off of the battlefield, but my Archon of Emeria bit the dust to a Grist -2. As you'll see later in the video, I wound up cutting Archon in the second build of this deck. But anyway, Court of Calling for 4 was cast on my opponent's next turn, and myself, being a black-green Yawgmoth aficionado, knew what this meant. I was 0% to win the game from this point forward, so I scooped, only to get rolled by my opponent's Mole to 5 in the next game. In my defense, they had a turn 2 Grist into a turn 3 Yawgmoth, which is just silly when you're playing a creature deck. It wasn't even close. We're 1-1. Match 3. We won the die roll. Let's go. 7 looks fine. We'll keep it. Start with our Bloodstained Mire. Pass turn. Scalding Tarn. We're going to fetch end of turn. Get our Triome. Drawn to a Monk. Play out the Plains. And a Jarina. Trigger. They get a Stomping Ground. Untapped. And they dead our Jarina. I think Archon's going to be pretty good against them. If I had a guess. Opponent with an Otawara. However, if they tap down our land, that wouldn't be great. And they don't. Okay. Bloodstained Mire fetch. Basic Mountain. Archon of Emeria. Okay, opponent with a Subtlety. Exile a Tidebinder. And from this point, I think we might need to take a different game plan. We'll put it on the bottom. They don't have a third land. Wow. We draw a Mutt. I'm going to start by dashing in Ragavan. Combat. Attack for 2. Damage. There will be a trigger. We see a Violent Outburst on top. We could cast that. I don't think that's going to do much, though, outside of Cascade. Play our Takenuma. 3 mana for a Pyromancer. Trigger. And I'm going to discard 2. We see a Ranger Captain and a Magus. Those will be great next turn. Ragavan back to hand. Still no third land. That's rough. My plan this turn was to dash in the Ragavan, make a treasure, and use it to cast out the Ranger Captain. But things didn't go as planned when they iced down the monkey. So instead, I had to improvise and flash in a Bowmaster to make use of my mana and ping them off the extra draw they took. They finally found their third land, which was a Gemstone Caverns, but it didn't allow them to cast the Violent Outburst in hand, so they scooped it up. Game 2 was a quick one after I mulliganed to 5. My turn 1 Ragavan was dead on arrival, and while Orcish Bowmasters is a great card, it's not very good when facing down 2 4/4 trampling rhinos. My plan was to race, jamming a Winota on the next turn, but Subtlety intercepted my captain, and I was completely out of gas. Let's move on to Game 3. Okay, Game 3, we're on the play. I feel much more confident. 7 has an Archon, not much else. I think we'll start with our Bloodstained Mire, pass turn. Scalding Tarn, draw a Prismatic Ending. I'm going to keep these fetch lands up so they can't ice us down during our next turn. They fetch end of turn, Stomping Ground, untapped. It's going to be a Lorien Revealed. Get themselves a breeding pool. Untap. Basic Island, back to us. Draw to Jarina. Play out a mountain, fetch. The plains, fetch. Get our swamp, play out an Archon. Okay, Archon's in play. It's back to their turn. They get 1 spell. Breeding pool, it's going to come into play tapped. They still shocked it in. Oops. And they do nothing. Draw a second Winota. shock in the Sacred Foundry, Winota, and a Subtlety discarding Fire Ice. That's fine. We'll put Winota on the bottom. Combat, attacking for 2. Opponent's at 13 life, 6 cards in hand. Play out a Misty, and they do nothing. Now we draw Sokazan, which will be nice next turn. Another Winota. I think they're going to kill our Archon here. And they do. Return it to my hand. Winota's in play. Blood Crypt tapped. Back their way. Land, fetch, tapped. 3 mana. It's going to be a Shardless agent. Crashing Footfalls, 2 Rhinos, and a Shardless. Untap. We find a Ragavan, which is also really good. I also can just set up for next turn. Maybe that's the move. Prismatic Ending, get rid of a Rhino. Cast out a Ragavan. Recast our Archon. Not going to attack with our Winota. We'll just pass it back. They fetch end of turn. They're going down to 11 life. Triumph tapped. Untap. Play out an island. No attacks. Back our way. Blood Crypt. We're going to start on Jarina. Just in case they have a Tidebinder, it will give our Winota protection. Exile their graveyard. Discard Sokazan. 2 1/1s. Move to combat. We're going to swing for 4. 4 Winota triggers. Ranger Captain, put it into play. Trigger Ranger Captain. Opponent scoops. 2 and 1.
So things were looking up after our first few matches, but then the wheels completely fell off. I had back-to-back matches with severe mana issues. First against Amulet Titan, where I couldn't find my 4th land over 6 turns to cast any one of the 4 Winotas in my hand. In game 2, admittedly a little tilted, I kept a 1-lander on the play with a Ragavan. The monkey got dismembered, and I never drew a 2nd land. The next match, much the same against Domain Zoo, not finding a 3rd land until turn 7 of game 2. So my first league with Winota started great, but didn't finish so well. I went back to the drawing board and reworked the mana base to add an extra land. I resubmitted and tried my luck again. I want to be clear before we start this match that if I'm playing you on camera and you salt on me, I'm going to put it out there. I knew my opponent from my Legacy days, and let's just say they had a reputation for being, how should I say it, a poor sport.
Okay, and 5 hours later they take the Ragavan. Followed up by a Grief, discarding a Grief. And they take the Jarina. Interesting. Draw a 2nd Prismatic Ending. Play out a 2nd Giver. Play a land, pass turn. Opponent's up to 5 in hand. Lightning Bolt our Giver. We'll give the other Giver protection. We'll go black. Opponent does not have a land drop. We're going to fetch end of turn. We'll get our Triumph. Untap. We draw a land. We'll play that out. Nothing to protect here. So I think we're going to attack. They could have a Ragavan, but they need a 2nd land to make that work. So it's back their way. 14 life. No land drop. End of turn we'll fetch. We'll get a Sacred Foundry tapped. Untap. And we draw another land. Okay, we're good on lands at this point. Combat. Swing for 1. Bolt down our Giver. Play out a land. Pass back. Find their 2nd land, fetch, swamp, and a Voidwalker. We have the answer for that one. Drawn to a Ranger Captain. Might be worthwhile playing that one out first, and I think we will. Ranger Captain trigger, yes, and as much as I want to get a Ragavan, I think we're going to get a Giver to play around a Bowmaster. Giver into play, pass it back. Verdant Catacombs, fetch, Blood Crypt Shock, they're down to 10. Molten Collapse hitting our Ranger Captain. We'll sacrifice. Ranger Captain goes to exile, and I think they're going to put an Undying Spell. Okay, no Undying Spell. They just sacrifice the Voidwalker, play out Ranger Captain, and they're going to get a Ragavan, I would imagine. And they do. Ragavan. Ragavan's in play. Untap. Okay, we draw a Ragavan of our own. We'll start by getting rid of their Ragavan. And they knew about our Prismatic Ending. And now from here, I can dash in the Ragavan, give it protection, and try to steal something. I think we're going to do that. Give it protection from white, combat, attack for 2. Opponent's down at 8, trigger Ragavan. We see a Blood Crypt on the top. Ragavan back to hand. Opponent with their 4th land, it's going to be a Grief. Oh, Fable, okay. Not a Grief. And they attack for 3, very aggressive. We're at 15. Bloodstained Mire. We're going to ending this Goblin Shaman. Dash in Ragavan, move to combat, attack for 2. They're going down to 6. They Fatal Push our Giver. Okay, not sure what that accomplishes. Ragavan triggers. We find a Blood Tithe Harvester. I think we'll be casting that one. We'll get our Bloodstained Mire. We'll fetch. Basic Swamp. Red, black. Play the Harvester. Trigger. Blood Token. And Ragavan back to hand. Fable ticks up to 2. They have 1 card in hand to discard. and get rid of a Voidwalker. Draw a card, still attacking. We'll go down to 11. Untap. Draw Marsh Flats. They could have a Bowmaster here, and for that reason I think I'm going to start with an attack. Attack for 3. Okay, and there is a Bowmaster. We're going to sacrifice the blood token, discard the Marsh Flats. We find another Ragavan. Bowmaster into play, hits the Harvester, block the Harvester, it's going to die. Second main, cast out our Ragavan. They have 1 card in hand, Fable's going to flip. No attacks, back to us.
So with the Fable flipped and no way to remove it, all of our 1 toughness creatures are invalidated until we can find a Bowmaster of our own, which never happens. They gradually assume more and more control over the board and then swing in for a lethal attack. We're down a game. Okay, we're going to board out 2 Pyromancer, 2 Magus. We're going to bring in Rest in Peace, Sanctifiers, and Combo. Take the play. 7 is fine, we'll keep it. We do need some creatures in between 1 and 4, for sure. Opponent keeps their 7. Start Arid Mesa, fetch out a basic into a giver. They start basic Swamp and a Thoughtseize. Imagine they take Winota here. Draw an Inspiring Vantage, play out the Sacred Foundry, tapped, combat, attack for 1, pass turn back. Bloodstained Mire, fetch, Blood Crypt, shock, and the Blood Tithe Harvester. Draw a Sanctifier, that one's pretty good. I will play that out. Play out an Inspiring Vantage. They have perfect information. We'll just pass back. Having the Sanctifier in play is a godsend because it completely brickwalls any attacks they may have been able to make. We both play out creatures and stare at each other for a few turns until I draw and am able to cast out Winota with Jarina for protection. Okay, Bloodstained Mire, fetch, shock and a Blood Crypt, Jarina, trigger, exile their graveyard, Winota, combat. We're going to swing with 2, trigger Winota. Found another monk, comes into play attacking, and they scoop it up. Okay, our opponent's on a mulligan to 6, and I think we can get really punished keeping a hand like this, so I'm going to join them on a mulligan. And this is unfortunate. Opponent mulligans to 5, we're going to join them there as well. Alright, this 5 is acceptable. We're going to keep bottom Triome and Pyromancer. Opponent's on 5. Blackleaf Cliffs, and a Thoughtseize. Probably take our Giver, take our Jarina. Draw another one, okay. Ganjo, Giver, pass turn. Blackleaf Cliffs, and a Voidwalker. Okay, we draw to a Bowmaster, not bad. I think we're just going to try to put them on a clock. So we're going to attack. They're at 17. I'm going to lead on Jarina, and the next turn I'll go Bowmaster. We'll exile their graveyard. Opponent with Thoughtseize, I imagine they take the Bowmaster here. Or maybe the Combo and then put it into play. Okay, they take the Bowmaster. Attack for 3. We're at 17. Alright, we find our 3rd land. So we're going to start protecting our creatures here. We'll move to combat. Attack in for 2. Opponent's down 13. Land, fetch, Sacred Foundry, shock, and a Combo. Blood Tithe Harvester. It's going to trigger. No attacks. Strange no attacks. And draw a Bowmaster. Guess we have a Bowmaster in exile. Maybe that's what they're going for. I think we can attack with this Combo. Yeah, we'll swing. Okay, no blocks. They're down to 11. They play a land, shock, 3 mana for a Pyromancer. Comes into play, it's going to trigger. We'll play out a Bowmasters. And they scoop it up. And I have to show it. This player is known for their salt, and we got some at the end of that round. So if you were wondering, our second league ended exactly the same as our first, where we started 2-1 and then lost our last 2 matches to the same decks we played in the first league. I've played leagues with Winota before, and I think a green splash might be the way to go. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it despite the fact we didn't do great. I hope you have too. Until next time, you know the deal. Be well. Oh, and leave the salt at home.